tell. It's Wednesday morning. I'm a little tired. Last night I tried to record this and either the SIM card was full or the battery died. So that didn't work out very well. So I'm recording it this morning. Okay, so this is the story of the dropping of the phone. Now, when you think about that title, what comes to mind? Maybe you pulled your phone out of your pocket and you're going to look at it and you accidentally dropped it and you cracked the screen. Maybe something even crazier happened, like your phone was taken by your friend and he threw it off the top of the house or something like that and just destroyed the phone. Well, think about that, but amplified by about 10,000. That's what will happen in this story. Okay, story all starts. It's 2007. I'm 8 years old, and there's this guy named Steve Foster. Now, Steve Foster is my uncle's uncle by marriage, so it's more of a distant relation. Steve owns a paintless dent repair company, which is basically what that means is he goes in when there's a hailstorm somewhere, and he'll fix the dents in cars and dealerships, and he does it without trying to damage the paint more than it already is. And that's his job. So at this time, my dad was a private pilot. At the same time, he's also a commercial pilot, and so he wasn't doing commercial. He'd go and fly people around if they'd pay him for the gas or the fuel and for the labor of flying. So that was just a little part-time thing he did at the time. And Steve needed to go to Cleveland, Ohio, because he had to have a meeting with the Progressive Insurance Company with some of the bigger people up in the company, because he has to deal with the insurance people whenever he's doing the dent repair. So he asked my dad. He said, "Well, would you take me up to Cleveland for my meeting, and I'll pay you and everything like that?" And I was like, "Yeah, that's fine. Is it okay if I bring my son?" And he said, "Yeah, it's fine as long as you don't get in the way of anything." He's like, "Oh, that'll be fine." So I got to go, which was really cool for me because at this time I had never gone to any state outside of like the bordering states of Arkansas. Maybe like I might have went to Georgia one time, but that was more like kind of drove there. It wasn't that cool. But this was kind of cool because it was several states away. It's just like a new experience. So we met with Steve and Cersei and took off on our way to Cleveland, Ohio. And before we left, we of course got fuel and we checked the weather and we did all the things we had to do. And whenever you're about to take off, you have to call a thing called flight service, and they'll give you, and you have to tell them your flight plan and check the weather and all stuff like that. And so we did that, and they predicted the weather and said the wind was going to be calm, and it turned out it was all right. And so when we got up there to Cleveland, we dropped off Steve. Steve was picked up by Progressive people and taken off to his meeting, and we rented a rental car and went. And I was like, "Dad, what's there to even do in Cleveland? Like, I've never been here before. What is there to do?" And he's like, "Well, we can go to this museum." I was like, "All right, sounds cool," because at this time I really like museums and just old stuff and learning about stuff. So we went and saw this museum called the Crawford Auto Aviation Museum, which housed all these different types of World War II airplanes and old vintage cars. And it's just really cool because it's stuff you don't see every day. And even though it's maybe not something I'm the most interested in, it's still something that I could learn from. So it was cool. But one downside of this was that my dad wanted to see this one plane that he really liked, but at the time the plane was on display somewhere else, so I didn't get to see it. After we'd been sitting there a while at the museum, Steve eventually called us, told us he was done with his meeting, and we can meet him up at the airport, the think it's Cuyahoga County Airport. It's like an Indian word, but that's what the Cleveland Airport's called. And we met up with him. We returned the rental car, and then we, did everything else that you had to do before you leave. We got in our plane once we fueled up, and what you have to do, like I said earlier, you have to call flight service and ask them about the weather. Well, this time we did the same thing, called them up, asked them about the weather, and what happened was they told us that the wind was going to be mild, it wouldn't be too bad. And so we planned to land in Evansville, Indiana, which is maybe a third of the way back to Arkansas, so we can fuel up again. So we planned to do that, and when we took off, the wind was going at a much higher velocity than what we had been told. So our plans of going to Evansville was, we couldn't go there anymore. We had to stop in a place called Bedford, which was maybe, I don't even know how many miles short of Evansville to fuel up. So when we got to Bedford, we got out, fueled up. My dad called my mother just to check in, like, what's happening, like, we're coming home now, all that. Steve called his wife, Donna, told her everything too, just checking up. And then we, got back in the plane once we filled up, and we started to take off. And so my dad, there's these fold-out windows in the mall, this airplane we take, and they fold out like this, and there's like a little like L bracket that holds on like the window, and you can like lock it so it'll hold it in place. So what he decided to do was, he had the phone at the time. He had a Motorola StarTAC, which is whenever you think of a flip phone, it's the phone you think of. It's that one. So he took that phone with the clip on it, and he clipped it onto the L bracket. Once he closed the window, and that's what he usually does. So it doesn't like affect the flight or anything. It's just the place where he puts it. So when we got up in the air, we started flying, and we eventually got to the place we were going to land previously, like we had planned to, Evansville. So when we saw it, my dad was like, "Oh, there's Evansville, the airport we're going to land at." And he's like, "Oh, that's cool." And he rolled over the plane so we could all look down on Steve's side. And whenever he rolled back, he somehow bumped his arm against the window or like the side of the plane or something, and the window popped open. And I guess the speed of the wind coming by the plane just ripped his phone out of the plane and went flying just out into the abyss of the clouds. And at this point we were like, well, that sucks. We got to buy a new phone when we get back. I guess that one's gone forever. And that's where Steve Jackson comes into the story. Now, Steve Jackson owned quite a bit of property up in Evansville, the place we were flying over. Steve also owned a 30-acre pond on his property. So this wasn't a small piece of property, it was pretty large. And at this time, Steve was mowing his yard, like his yard for his house. And on his about third or fourth pass, he came around and saw something in the mowed section of the yard where he'd already been. And he said, he thought to himself, well, what is that? I would have seen that if I came around the first time. So he stopped his mower, got up, and walked over. And when he came upon this mysterious item, it turned out to be Motorola StarTAC, completely functional, nothing wrong with it. So he picked it up. I was like, well, whose phone is this? Where could this come from? I don't understand. Well, the first thing Steve did was pick up the phone and say, first thing he did was pick up the phone and call one of my dad's friends, Courtney Holt. Like, out of all the people he called, it wouldn't have been the first person on the call list or anything. He said to scroll down, I'm going to call Courtney Holt. So he called her, and like any other time, Courtney would answer the phone. She's like, "Oh, hey, DH, what's up?" Well, Steve said, this isn't DH, this is Steve Jackson. I just found this phone on my property. And Courtney was like, okay, where are you at, Steve? And he's like, I'm in Evansville, Indiana. And Courtney had no idea why the phone would be out there. She didn't know that we were flying at the time. She didn't know anything. So she said, well, you seem to call his wife. So call Terry on the phone. So he proceeded to hang up, call my mom, Terry, and of course the same thing happened whenever she answered the phone. She's like, oh, hey David, what's up? I couldn't hear you very well the last time you called me. So so you check back in, what's happening? So he said, hey, this is Steve Jackson. They went through the same thing, like, where you at? How'd you get the phone? He says he don't know. And then she was like, are you near an airport? And Steve said, well, yeah, I am. I live near the Evansville airport. And she said, well, you think there's been like a crash or anything recently? So at this point, she's already assuming the worst, that we've crashed and we've, like, the phone just flew out of the plane, just miles away. And Steve, I don't know, he just said, yeah, I think there was. I saw some smoke earlier, and I saw some fire trucks race by. So I don't know if Steve was just making this up, or just a coincidence that this happened at the same exact time that he found the phone. But at this point, my mom starts freaking out. She is panicking, and she doesn't know what to do. So the first thing that she can think of, she calls JP, who is my uncle, who is, like, Steve's nephew-in-law, I guess it would be. So JP, at first, JP is also a pilot, so JP would probably be the best person to call for this. So JP at first is, panicking, like, oh, they crashed. We got to figure this out. But he eventually calms down, and then he calls flight service, which is flight service. You can, if you call them up and tell them if there's, like, been a problem or something, they'll help you out to try to find the airplane. So what he does is he calls them, but they won't release it. They're not going to release the information for him at first about the the location of the airplane until he tells them, there might have been a crash. We don't know exactly what's happening. And so, like, oh yeah, give us the N number. And the N number is the number you'll see on the side of a plane, and I think it's only in America they use them. The N number is called something else anywhere else, but it's on our mall it was 1055 Charlie, and Charlie is a C in the phonetic alphabet. And so he gives them the N number. He looks it up, and he finds out that it's still in connection with Memphis Control, which is their air traffic control at Memphis Airport. And so Memphis tells them that their plane is over Pocahontas at the point in Arkansas and making its descent into Walnut Ridge. And so, once flight service figures this out, they immediately call JP back, or if he was on hold, they get back on the line with him. They're like, okay, he is in Pocahontas making his descent into Walnut Ridge. And Walnut Ridge is where we're going to stop for our next thing of gas, because, well, whenever the winds are so high, you got to stop more often than you would if not. So JP figured this out. He goes to tell my mom, but in the meantime, whenever JP was on the phone with flight service, my mom had gone ahead and called Donna, who is Steve Foster's wife, the guy we're with, and she, is panicking. She doesn't know really what's happening right now. She's like, oh my goodness, some random guy called off David's phone. They could have been in a crash. We don't really know what's happened. We're trying to figure it out. And so now Donna's freaking out. Donna, immediately, first thing she does, picks up her phone, starts calling Steve. And of course, Steve doesn't pick up because when we were in the airplane, we didn't have service on the one remaining phone that was in the airplane. So Steve is oblivious to any of this. So she calls him and calls him and calls him. And eventually, after this happened, JP called my mom and said, I know where they're at. They're over Pocahontas. They're going into Walnut Ridge right now. She calmed down a little bit, called Donna, and then Donna again called Steve and said, he left another voicemail, said, just go ahead and disregard all the previous voicemails because I figured out that you're okay now, so just disregard everything else that I just said. So she did that, and at this point, everybody is very confused and they do not understand anything that's happening right now. And also, back in the cockpit, this is about 5 minutes after the phone has fell. We're still laughing and making jokes about how the phone fell out of the airplane, and the phone fell from 7,500 feet, which is over a mile. It's really high. So the phone fell, and we were like, oh, it hit the ground, went 20 feet into the ground. It's gonna be found in 1,000 years by some archaeologists, and they're gonna be like, they don't even know what a phone is. It's like just making stupid jokes. Or maybe guys in rush hour traffic in Evansville, and he's like, God, please give me a sign, and the phone just comes crashing through the windshield or something stupid like that. And of course, at this point, everybody is freaking out because they just got the call from Steve Jackson, the guy that found the phone, and he's saying, "Oh, I think there's a crash somewhere around here. I don't know." And then we're completely oblivious to everything. Steve doesn't know that his wife's been calling him, and so as a small businessman like Steve is, he usually deals with many phone calls a day. But in the span of 3 hours from the time we left Cleveland, Ohio, to the time we got back to Walnut Ridge, Arkansas, Steve had received 31 voicemails. And this was very concerning to Steve because he does not usually receive this many voicemails in this short amount of time. So he was concerned. So he opened his voicemail, listened to the voicemail, and was like, "Oh no, David. Your phone's not on the ground, and your phone did not fall through somebody's windshield. Some man found it, and everyone is very concerned right now." And so once Steve had called Donna, and then my dad had called my mom off of Steve's phone, and we assured everyone that we were fine and that we did indeed not die, we fueled up again from Walnut Ridge and proceeded on our way to Searcy, Arkansas. And so, you think this is where the story ends, but it doesn't. Once we got back to Searcy, Steve had still been in contact. Steve Jackson, the guy that found the phone, he was still in contact with my mother, and he said, okay. And at this point, Steve was thinking, maybe this is the coolest thing that's ever happened to me. I can't believe this is happening right now. And so Steve's like, hey, if I just keep the phone, can I keep the phone right now and I'll send it back to you, tomorrow? And she was like, I guess, why are you trying to keep it? And he said, well, if I go into the office and try to tell my buddies this story, they're not going to believe this. I have to have the phone with me. She was like, oh, okay, that's fine. You can take it in. I just want you to send it back to me. And he's like, all right, great. So Steve would, every day for a week, go into his office and show a new person the phone and tell them the story of how he found the phone. And, of course, even if you have the phone, some people are not going to believe you. So Steve would open the phone and be like, oh, yeah? And he'd type up a number and call them. And they'd be like, oh, hey, David, what's up? And he'd be like, oh, no, this is Steve Jackson. And, of course, the person on the other end of the line was like, who's Steve Jackson? Why is he calling me? Why is he on David's phone? I'm very confused right now. And that would inevitably prove to the person that Steve Jackson was talking to that he indeed did have David Freppen's phone from, not from Indiana. Let's say that. So, Steve eventually used up the phone until the battery died, and he did not have a charger for this type of phone. So he, went to the AT&T store, the nearest one to him, and went in and said, hey, this phone fell out of an airplane. They're like, yeah, okay, whatever. What do you need? And he said, can you just FedEx it to this address? Because we gave him the address, and once he was done with it, he sent it back. So of course they didn't believe him, and he didn't he explained it so many times, I think he was probably tired of explaining it, so he gave him the phone, and then they FedExed it back to us. And the crazy thing is, after this story that really probably nobody would believe if you didn't have the proof of the phone, About 3 years later, 3 or 4 years later, my dad just tossed the phone, just threw it away. Oh, it's just a phone. You don't need it to have any validity in the story. It's whatever. But that's the dropping of the phone story, and hope you enjoyed.